Gabby Wong, CEO of FranConnect. Glad to have you here.
Hello, how's everybody? This is amazing. I feel like I'm kind of like coming home because we're talking about ARR and net revenue retention and gross revenue retention. And I was thinking we were going to talk about NPS. I'll talk a little bit about NPS. But it feels like coming home, seeing so many CS people in this room and with this great view. So thank you for having me. The slide's up. So just a few things. This is a really hard presentation for me to do. And the reason why is I'm a team-oriented person. Most of us CS people are very team-oriented people. I don't say I a lot, so it's going to be hard for me to go through this presentation because it's going to be like me, I. It feels a little bit weird for me. The reality is my growth path to CEO in large part is because we grew tremendously at FranConnect, and we have a tremendous team at FranConnect. So it's a little bit awkward for me to talk about this, but I'm going to do my best to share my story with you. So somebody came up with this great title, which is the C in CEO, and I know you guys were all thinking it's about customers. And in large part, my story is about how to put customer success, customer experience front and center as part of your growth model. But if you hear my story, you'll also hear that it's as much about chance or opportunity, and I'll talk you through the opportunities that I had. And it's also about change. As Yuman talked about, the way that we think about CEOs is changing, and the nature of the job of CEOs is changing. And you guys are front and center of all the things that you need, all the skills that you need to be a great CEO, and also either if it's not a CEO, take the step to the next level as well. So I'm going to talk you through how I leveraged all my customer experience focus and all my CS focus to get to that level. So leading from the side, that's kind of how I describe myself. So I have a big secret here. It's not a big secret anymore because I put it really big on the slide. I never saw myself as a CEO. I didn't. And you can see this. I love this slide because it's kind of a meandering path. Typically, when you think of CEOs, you think of a path that's sort of up and to the right. And my path, my journey, I've been 25 years now in this career, yes, I'm old, I know. My path was not necessarily up and to the right. It was more of a meandering path. And so let me tell you about my story. I started my career in, at the time, Big Six Consulting. And I focused not just on technology, but I focused on strategy and business process, and really pulling all those things together to deliver great customer value. And spent a good bit of time in Big Six Consulting, Deloitte and Pricewaterhouse, and really honed my customer focus and my customer skills. I then decided at that point that I didn't want to do services for service's sake. I wanted to really get into the product environment. I really wanted to get into a PE-backed company and know what it was like to lead with product, but to leverage my secret sauce, which was my focus on customers. I did successive SaaS customer ventures, all local, all very successful. You've probably heard of some of them, Clarabridge. I did Trusted Computer Solutions, which got bought by Raytheon, which became ForcePoint. I also did a company called Vovisi, which got bought by Verint. So I did some products that were in the CS space as well. At a certain point, I decided I needed to take a step back, and I took a step back for a year, had children, needed to kind of clear my head, and I got a call from a great private equity firm who said, hey, we are struggling with how to operationalize customer success. Will you come and consult with this company and determine how we can best propel and scale customer success? That company was FranConnect. I started as a retained consultant hired by the private equity firm. And at that point, I grew into a CCO role at FranConnect. In 2018, we did a CEO change. And that was my catalyzing moment for CEO. So my big secret is I did not see myself as CEO. I never sought out to be CEO. And I think probably a lot of you can relate to that. I never said, this is what I have to do. I don't have to be in the power seat to have an impact or to make a change. Why don't we see ourselves as potential CEOs? After all, the point of a business is to make, create, and keep customers. And you guys are right front and center of all that. Great time series study put forth by Spencer Stewart, published by HBR recently in Harvard Business Review. By the way, this is not just me. This is not just my story. This could be all of your story. The way and the promotion path for CEOs is changing. And if you look at the data in this study, they did a 20-year study. And over that 20-year study, they looked at what were the dimensions of the skill set required for the CEO path. And what was interesting is, and you look here, most CEOs are internal promotions. And that hasn't changed over 20 years. That's been pretty consistent. But what has changed are who is getting promoted. And who's getting promoted, and you can see here, are primarily market-facing functions. It's no longer CFO, it's no longer Chief Revenue Officer. These are market-facing functions. And what's interesting is the last one here, Leapfrog. 5%, and they're seeing now, 5% has come from what they call Leapfrog, people who are VP level, not C-suite, and they're moving up to the CEO path. And what's interesting here is that roughly half of those performed in top quartile for CEO over performance. So tremendous path. I consider myself in these latter two categories. I consider myself market-facing, and I consider myself a Leapfrog candidate. Okay, so who is FranConnect? So as I told you before, my growth story is FranConnect's growth story. Obviously with a name, we're in franchising. So I'm gonna ask you guys a quick question to the audience. What do you guys think of when you think of franchising? Fast foods, what else? Good, that's great. Who said hotels? Great. What else? Gyms, exactly. So franchising is a business model. And it is a business model that is very similar to our business model. It's a licensing model. And they're licensing a concept that another person can take to market. Very, very similar to SaaS businesses. It's a forward-looking growth model. It's not just restaurants. I know we typically think of McDonald's and Burger King. Then we think of gyms, Gold's Gym, et cetera. We support the entire business model of franchising, regardless of what vertical it operates in. We are what I call the system of record for the franchise agreement. So we are the growth ERP. And that's really hard. It's really hard to grow in franchising. It's very hard because they have to manage the B2B relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. And they also have to ensure that the franchisee is successful. So they have to make sure that the franchisee can get customers to the door as fast as possible. We are the largest player in the market. We have about 40% market share. There's about 3,500 brands in North America. There's obviously more worldwide. And you can see here we have about 1,500 brands. About 900 of those brands are in North America. 1,500 is total worldwide brands. We have offices in Australia and India and Canada. So very nice presence. You can see here we have enterprise brands as well as SMB. So I was one of those people that raised my hand pretty much the whole time because we serve the entire market, whether that be 50 units, 100 units, or in many cases 10,000 units. Okay? Okay, as I said before, our core mission is to help the franchisees grow. And the reason why that's important, then I'll talk you through a little bit about our growth story. We started out as what I would call a custom software shop, serving a market that was traditionally underserved. Not a lot of people wanted to sell to the franchise market because it is considered SMB. They were late adopters of technology. It wasn't a great market to be in. And our founder, Amit Pamecha, founded the company and said, hey, I can serve you up technology. I can serve you up great technology. And so he founded the company in 2000. In 2015, we got private equity investment. And we essentially, the thesis was, we can make a SaaS business, a standardized SaaS business, out of this franchise model, out of franchise tech. And over the course of 15 through 18, we roughly consolidated all of our tech and franchising and made it into a SaaS model. And that was a heavy lift. And you can see here we grew roughly only 8% a year-over-year CAGR, which is considered a slow grower for a SaaS company. At that point, because we were the market leader, we had the vast majority of the market in tech for franchising. We basically created the market. So people, when they thought of franchise tech, they thought of FranConnect. We were considered sort of old technology, outdated, And we needed a refresh. We needed a brand change. We needed a new identity. And so my catalyzing moment for CEO was in 2018. And I'll talk you through some of the strategy that we did and how I used all my customer experience and customer success focus to catapult us to our next growth phase. If it weren't for COVID, and COVID certainly was a big impact for everybody, but it definitely impacted our market. If you think about restaurants, if you think about gyms, people were not going to gyms during COVID. People were not going to tableside restaurants. They were certainly going to QSR. But since we put that plan in place, we catapulted. And you can see here, not only have we grown organically, we've also acquired 2 companies, and we obviously have more consolidation to do in the market and more to offer the market. So it's been a tremendous growth path. And when I tell people my growth story is really about FranConnect's growth story. And why is that? Because the way that I look at customer success is that we have to focus on customer value. How do you deliver value to the customers? And that's about all the things I've worked on in my life. It's about customer experience. That's outside in. So in 2018, we were like, what happened to our market? What happened to us? We were this great product. We had the vast majority of the market, but we were very inward looking. And in 2018, we did an extensive strategy exercise, and I'll talk you through that in a little bit. So that is outside in. What do our customers expect from us? What are their problems? What are their needs? What are their desires? And that's a really important point about like how do you develop products and take them to market. You have to understand what your customers want and need, and you have to attach to that greater desire. Also, when I think of that kind of catapult moment, we pushed forward and we got really, really detailed on segmentation. I know you guys are all, most customer success people, heavily focused on segmentation. We got very, very down into the segmentation of what our market wants. We defined what the gaps were, and we pushed forward both a market and new product strategy over a 5-year plan to help get us through that catapult moment. And last, how do you operationalize it? I look at customer success as the operational component of what the customer wants, what our strategy is, what our product strategy is. You guys are the tip of the spear for taking product to market, and that's how you have to see yourself. You're the first to get feedback. You know all the use cases. You know exactly what the customers want and need and how they're using the product. You're like right at the catbird seat at the table for that. Let's go through 6 points of how we leveraged customer success in order to propel us forward. 1, we talked about connecting with our customers' higher purpose. In franchising, it's a super, super interesting market. We are selling to people who are just like ourselves. They're entrepreneurs. And they have a maturity model, just like we all have maturity models in our markets. And that is, how do you scale a franchise from concept all the way to a mature enterprise? And we had to attach to that. We had to say, what are the needs of our customers as they go through that growth curve? And what are their desires? You know, what are they struggling with? And how can we help them grow through that? So that sort of was number 1, I have to say, connect with your customer's higher purpose. Number 2, we talked about this in terms of strategy. Growth doesn't happen by accident. You guys need to be as much strategists as you do operational folks. The metrics are a function of the strategy that you put forth, and it tells you whether or not you're doing well and you're performing against that market strategy. In 2018, we did a 5-year plan. In 2019, we did another 5-year plan. In 2020, we didn't plan because we were just like everybody else trying to figure out what was going on. In 2021, we did a 5-year plan, and again, this year we're doing a 5-year plan. So we are constantly forward-leaning, forward-looking, and determining what it's going to take to push our market forward and to serve the needs of our customers. And this little chart here is just an example. It's an old strategy, an old example of a 5-point strategy we put forth. Drive to customer experience. So I was kind of embarrassed to put this slide up a little bit because it says that we had highly negative customer experience, and we did. I think it's good to be honest. We put in place a plan to measure customer experience along every point in the journey. We did. I'm not going to tell you how negative it was. That's why I didn't put that up here. But and you might say, oh, positive 30 is not that great. I know. I hear it all the time. It's actually great for our market. I've looked at the data across our, all the tech vendors in our market. It's actually really strong. And then not only do we look at that's our relationship customer experience, like how are we doing with the buyers? We also use Pendo. We look at the product and user experience. And we look at that for every single module. We have a huge module set. We probably have 10 to 12 different modules. We look at the customer experience and the product experience in those particular modules. We look at the usage of those particular modules. We use Delighted and Ask Nicely to look at the service experience provided by our PS team. We also look at the support experience. And then last but not least, as you guys know, we put everything into ChurnZero. And we just started that exercise along with our usage data, along with payment data, along with ARR, everything that we need to be able to segment the performance of our customers and understand the NPS. The one thing I'll tell you about NPS is we are gold on it as a company, but what's more important to me is not the score, but what we're doing about it and what the data tells us. I think that's the most important thing. Create value along the journey. So I know some of you are with smaller software companies and some of you with larger software companies. We have segmented our customer experience post-sale into 4 different groups. So we separate out our PS team from our CS team. So our CS team owns renewals. They actually own the gross retention number. They do not own upsells. Upsells is owned by sales. We have a separate team that does enablement, so first touch after sale. It takes a lot to enable because we're a system of record. So there's a lot. It's a data-rich implementation, and we're often replacing old legacy tools or tools that don't exist. So there's a lot of work that goes into the initial enablement. So that's a separate organization, and we measure them on profitability, utilization, and then also success on NPS. We also have a separate education team. And then last but not least, obviously support, which is aligned to our product organization. The thing that I would say is people, and especially with our product, people don't consume the product all at once. You don't just enable them and you go away. You consume the product over time. You mature with the product over time. And so you have to build a journey for your customers to be able to engage over all points in this journey. And that's the one thing I'll tell. I think we did it right. It took us a while to kind of break apart that team. I know it's hard to do, but I think it's worked pretty effectively for us. Culture eats strategy for lunch. So I also just want to say, yes, we had a negative employee NPS. We actually who looks at eNPS here? Does anybody in there? Yeah? Great. Awesome. Awesome. You cannot have a successful customer experience and design the way you want it if your employees aren't also bought into that process. And so we measure that employee experience and have measured that for the last 4 to 5 years. And when we got very intentional about our strategy and when we got very intentional about our growth and our product and about what we wanted out of our customer experience, we also saw a big increase on employee experience. It's 60 plus. Actually, I didn't think you guys would believe me, but we just did a pulse survey and it was 70 plus, and that's across all international locations. So that includes our India engineering offshore team. It's hard to get that kind of employee experience. We did it well, and I think we did it well because of alignment. It's all about alignment. The other thing we did is we built these kind of what I call pithy culture core values, and we use them as our mantras in the organization. You can see some of them here. Be your bold self. I wanted to say be your badass self, but they wouldn't let me put that on a slide. I thought it would be better, but be your bold self. Get grit. Just like get in there, get it done, do what's right. Everything we do impacts everything we do. That means the smallest thing matters. The smallest thing matters, and it adds up to the larger picture. So these are just some examples. We goal on it. We award on it. We write about it. It's really a core part of our core value and our cultures. And I think it's been a big needle mover for us in providing the right customer experience. And last, everyone needs a Bob. This is Bob Post. He was my mentor and sponsor. So the last part of my story that I'm going to share with you is not only did I not intend to be a CEO, I actually turned them down when they offered it to me. I know it sounds crazy. They reached out to me, and we were doing the CEO change. They said, hey, we're going to do an external search. Do you want to put your hat in the ring as the internal candidate? And I said no. And then I went home to my husband that night, and he was like, what'd you do? That was really dumb. Why'd you do that? And then I thought about it. I went through another board meeting, and then they came to me again, Bob Post came to me again and said, hey, I really think you should consider this. I really think that you are the right person for the role for this company, and you can take us to 100 million. And so what I will tell you is he was not my coach, but he was my mentor and sponsor. And there is a difference. A coach is someone that you can vent to. It's usually someone outside of your reporting structure. It could be within the organization or outside the organization, but they're not someone that you report to, because you have to be able to, in the cone of silence, be able to vent and bounce ideas. A mentor can be a boss. A mentor can be a boss. A mentor definitely needs to be within the organization. And there's someone you can bounce ideas off of. You can't gripe to them. I would not gripe to your mentor, because I just don't think it's a good idea to do that. And then sponsor. Sponsor is somebody who's in a position of power. We can all benefit from sponsors, and we can all be sponsors. We can all be sponsors. And I think that's, like, when I look at Bob, and unfortunately we lost Bob during COVID. When I look at Bob, he was incredibly impactful for me in pushing me and telling me, you can do this, and I will sponsor you. And I will not only mentor you, but I will be that person who, he was on our board, in a position of power to make sure that you get the job and you'll win at the job. And so just one thing I just want to, and by the way, as a female leader, sponsors can be males. It's totally fine. It's awesome. Like, I give him a ton of credit for that, because I don't think, not everybody would have given me a seat at the table like he did. So give a ton of credit to Bob. Last but not least, after all that, even though I was unintentional about being CEO and I said no at first, I know, crazy as it seems, you have to go all in. So I know there's going to be times when you're not sure if you did the right thing. You might have imposter syndrome, like I have right now, all the time. But you have to go all in. You have to kind of like just embrace it. And you can't be half in and half out on this job or any next promotion you take. You just have to go all in and take the risk and take a leap of faith and make it work. And you'll be successful, or maybe you won't, but you'll learn from it and you'll be successful in the next gig. So that's all I have. Yuman.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gabby. So I'm going to interview Gabby for a few minutes, and then please have questions of your own. So we'll do a little fireside chat thing.
Yeah.
All right. So Gabby, I know a lot of CEOs, right? I know a lot of CEOs. I don't always like CEOs. They tend to switch seats. Okay. All right. There's a lot of
Thank you.
kind of noise. All right. So I'm not.
They give the short person the tall chairs. It's not great.
That's right. So I'm not I'm impressed by most CEOs. I'm not a big fan of all of them. They tend to talk about themselves a little bit, a little focus on themselves. And when I hear you, you don't want to talk about yourself, but when you want to talk about your business and your customers, that's sort of when you're really engaged. And so that's been a disadvantage, right, on your way up, right? Not focus on yourself and focus on the customer. Do you think that's going to change? So your path is really focusing on the customer, not focusing on yourself. You got there. What's your advice to these folks about that?
I think the data show that that's changing, and I think what I always focused on was solving the hardest problems. And you guys are, like I said, you're in the catbird seat to solve the hardest problems, because you have the nexus between the product, the market need, you understand the customer, you understand the strategy, and I put all that together, and that's the customer value. And so I think it's changing. I think that, and the data show that it's changing too. I think more and more people are seeing, and you see that with the Spencer Stewart data, more and more people are hiring leaders not for past experience, but for capability and capacity. And I think because of that, if my advice to you is go find the hardest problems to solve, and you will succeed. And you guys have the best experience to solve the hardest problems, I can tell you that. And I look at, that was my secret sauce all the way through. How do I solve the hardest problems that no one else can solve? because they don't have the kind of the triad of experience that I was able to bring to the table.
Got it. Well, hey, let me ask you a couple questions
Yeah,
about FranConnect. Going from an 8% grower to a 30% grower, I mean, that's just not, I mean, you're rebooting the company in many ways, right? Because there's a lot of momentum with companies, right? Once you're a fast grower, you get a lot of momentum. You become a slow grower, you kind of stay a slow grower. So the move was a hard one. So congratulations on that, right? So
It's not over yet.
it's not over yet. But you're also owned by a PE firm, is that
Yep.
right? Okay, so who here is sort of majority owned by outside equity? Raise your hand. Who's owned? Okay, majority. So maybe 25% of you. And by the way, this other 75%, there's a good chance that will happen to you as well, right? Because I mean, that's just the way our industry works. Now, not all PE firms have great, reputations, right? It's hard for some PE firms, it's hard to find the investment to convince them to invest in the customer experience, right? It feels like it's a little bit off the spreadsheet. It feels like it's a little bit, hard to describe. How did you get your PE colleagues to invest in the customer experience? Because that's what you talked about, right? I mean, the whole set was all customer.
I think I'm lucky. So Sarant Capital is our private equity firm, and probably the reason why we kind of gravitated together is because they are focused on the customer experience, right. And they have a core philosophy that you cannot have a successful high-growth software company if your core metrics around customer success are not strong, including NPS. Mm-hmm. They are like these folks, and I say guys because they are all guys. These folks are they're all ex-McKinsey people, so they firmly believe in NPS. So they give us NPS goals. We dig deep into the NPS. We actually have 4 board meetings a year. One board meeting we have product day, and then another day we have customer day, and we dig deep into that's one of one quarter, one meeting a year. We just talk about the customers and what the customer experience is. The other thing I'll tell you is we've acquired 2 companies now in the last year and a half to 2 years, and we've looked at more. And we go extensively into the customer experience. We hire a third-party firm. That third-party firm does what they call IDIs, deep interviews to get a sense of what that customer experience is. We also measure NPS, and we benchmark that across all their acquisitions. So I guess I'm lucky in that they are they firmly believe that you cannot have a successful company without having successful customers. And so I think that's why we gravitated together. I didn't have to do much change there.
Okay, so when you're looking at these companies to buy, do they have the focus on the customer? I mean, you're not always successful, right? You're not always. Maybe you're unlucky. You don't have a great product. Maybe you didn't find product market fit. But that all of them actually, care about the customer, care about NPS.
Yeah, I would say that. Yes, I mean, yes. Most successful software companies that we would look at are measuring customer success. Not everyone looks at NPS the way that we look at it, and I think I showed you the 4 or 5 ways that we look at NPS. I just don't believe in one score. I just don't. I never have, and I've been a customer experience person. I've taught customer experience, and so I think if you only look at one, if you only look at your user NPS, and you say, "Oh, my NPS is great," you're not getting the buyer or the sponsor. And if you're not looking at the service experience, you're only looking at kind of what the sponsor says, not what their experience is with your frontline team. So I think we're probably unique in that we look at all of it, and I would encourage you guys to look at all of it because they're all metrics. I kind of like that. You kind of like they're not always great, and you kind of got a meter off of them, and that's okay because it's red, yellow, green.
So when I was looking at your FranConnect slide with your customers. I saw the big customers, the names that we all know, yeah. And then I saw franchisees of names I've never heard of, right? So you really run the gamut. And for those of you who raised their hands earlier, like do you do SMB? Do you manage mid-market? Do you manage enterprise? Those of you who kept your hands up to all 3, and it sounds like you kept your hands up for all 3, that's quite a challenge. Was there a goal to say, hey, let's tighten up our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and go after one or the other?
So if you remember that growth curve I put forth, and we did 8%, CAGR, and then we kind of leapfrogged up. When in that first initial period, I would say we were great at mid-market, and people knew us in mid-market, and that was our core bread and butter. we at that point decided, like, look, this is yes, I mean, franchising, just so you know, is 3% of GDP. It's an $800 billion market, but there's only roughly 3,500 targets in North America. So we have to serve the entire market. We have to serve all areas of the market. And let me just give you some stats. 76% of the 3,500 brands are below 100 units. But the other 25% produce 90% of that 800 billion. Wow. So it's what I would call like a really bifurcated market. The smalls are really small, and the bigs are really big. And so we had to take, and like I love talking to customer success people because you guys know segmentation is your friend. We had to hyper segment our market, our desired customers, our desired targets. And we had to say, okay, what does SMB want? What does the sub 100 want? And that's, if you remember on the slide, that was like the emerging. What does the middle market want? And what are they trying to do? They've got a proven concept. They need to scale. So what are their needs and how does our software help them do that? And then enterprise, they're typically buying. They're going international. They're doing joint ventures. It gets quite complex. And so we took our it was 20 products we brought into one, and then we packaged that and said, okay, here's a package for SMB. Here's a package for mid-market. Here's a package for enterprise, because the needs are different in that maturity curve. And so that's how hyper-segmentation, data on the customer.
Right. It's rough. But I'm glad you're doing okay. 20 products into one?
We had 20 products that we squished
all right,
into
that's
one.
next year's session. 20 products into one. We're going to have to figure that one out. I don't even know what that means. All right, I got a follow-up question on your career.
Sure.
So you mentioned today, and I also listened to a podcast of yours, that you think most women like you just don't see themselves as a CEO, right? By the way, I didn't either, right? I certainly didn't see, I didn't see myself as a CEO. I just happened to start a company and made myself CEO, right? I mean, and so maybe my question to you is, I'm assume that other women, other people of color, I'm gonna give you the hard question first. Okay, so other women, other people of color, that keeps them from getting the representation in the CEO suite, right? So any ideas on how we get past this? Like, how do you see yourself? How do we see ourselves?
That's a hard question. First of all, if I hyper-focused on the fact that I go to these PE conferences. Is this being videotaped? Oh, God. I go to these PE conferences, and, I'm probably, one of a couple female CEOs. And if I hyper-focused on it, I can't. Like, I have to just be a part of it. You just got to blend in and be a part of it. I think the answer is, don't do what I did, which is say no. Like if someone's offering you the position, maybe you should consider it, because maybe they see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And that is the case with Bob Post. He saw something in me that I didn't see myself. So don't say no right away, because as women, I think we do this risk-reward thing. Like, is the risk worth the reward? And I honestly did that analysis myself when I turned it. In my head, I was like, oh, they're never going to give it to me. I love my job. I love this company. I want to stay. They're never going to give it to me. What am I doing? Went through all that analysis in my head. And I would encourage you that, the risk is worth the reward. So that's number one. Number two, it starts with sponsorship. Like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for our board and Bob Post. So the people who are in positions of power need to make room. And then we need to change the way that we make hiring decisions. Hire based on capability and capacity, not based on whether you've done it before, because I hadn't done it before. I had all the goods, but I hadn't done it before.
That's great. Well, I got two more questions about Bob.
Okay.
And then we'll open it up for some questions. So Bob, did Bob find you, or did you find Bob?
So we, as I said, we went through a pretty big turning point in 2018, and we went through a CEO change, and he stepped in as the exec chair. So I didn't find Bob. Bob came in as exec chair, okay. And then we worked together for 6 months, and he said, hey, you should do this.
In your career, did you actively seek out coaches, sponsors, and mentors?
You should always seek out mentors. And I would also encourage you as a new executive to have a separate executive coach. Steve Gladys is my executive coach. Like I said, you want someone separate in your cone of silence, like your psychologist, your business psychologist, who you can go to outside of your reporting structure. So I would definitely seek out an executive coach as you're growing in your career. And if your company can offer one to you, even better. We have offered that to members of our team. And it's just great self-learning. You should always seek out mentors. It's hard to find a sponsor. I think I would tell you, recognize when you have one and take advantage of that.
All right, so many of us are leaders here, and we, not only would like to have sponsors, but we are in fact, we are probably coaching, certainly. We are mentoring, and we are sponsoring. Any advice to be good versions of all those folks?
Oh, gosh, where do I start? I always start my one-on-ones with, I ask people how they're doing. I don't just, I think as CS people, and just in general as line leaders, we can get very focused on the metrics. The metrics are important, but sometimes you have to take a step back and you have to say, okay, this is not just all about what we're achieving in growth and metrics, how are people doing? Just a funny story, it's been certainly an interesting year for sure, and we just did this acquisition and everyone's stressed out, and I walked into our exec meeting and I said, I want everyone to stop and I want you to take a breath and sit here for 5 minutes and not talk and just meditate. And then I said, now we're going to go around the table and we're going to say, tell me the 3 top things that are most important to you right now. Take everything else, just put it by the wayside, because we all have too much going on. So I think as a leader, to be a good mentor, you also have to know when you're just your team's just at capacity and your people at capacity, and you got to get to the human side. If COVID taught us anything, it's that management is a human problem. Not just a people problem. It's a human problem.
That's great.
So,
hey, Gabby, will you be my coach?
I think you're my coach.
Will you be my coach? All right, we'll be
yeah, you're my coach.
All right, well, any questions from the audience? Gabby's here. Go ahead.
Give CS a seat. Oh, thanks. But CEOs don't always give CS a true seat at the table when it comes to genuinely listening to product feedback, CX feedback, projections of what the company is going to move forward with. I'd love to hear whatever you're willing to share, any specific ways that you try to incorporate your CS team and their feedback into larger decisions at the company.
Yeah, so we do. I mean, they're just. It's so ingrained in our culture. It's almost hard for me to answer because we started that way. When we started in 2015, we started that way. Our CS team is involved in product strategy and prioritization. So if you look at our product strategy, I'm sure most of you guys do this, we do 50% of our product roadmap is dedicated to growth, 30% is dedicated to customer needs, like existing customers and requirements for existing customers, because they always come up. You don't always get it right. And then the other 20% is just platform, maintenance, platform changes, platform growth, so the platform can keep up. And so that 30%, we essentially collect all the feedback. The CS team, both PS and CS, are intimately involved in ranking and prioritizing what gets through that customer feedback. And then we do extensive, on all the roadmap, we do extensive, it's not beta, it's beyond beta. We actually storyboard the changes with key customers. Our chief product officer, I'm sure Abby knows this, he uses Lean Stack, which is a methodology that's very focused on the business value and the workflows. And so we go, toe-to-toe with customers and we map what the workflows are, and we pull in the CS team for that as well, because they're the team that is most able to interpret kind of what that customer workflow is and how it's going to be utilized in that potential new product area. So we just do it across the board. I mean, honestly, it's hard for me almost to think about not having CS at the seat at the table.
So I'll give you some pieces of advice. So let's say your CEO is very numbers driven. So give her numbers, right? And commit to those numbers. That's really how you get a seat at the table, right? When you commit to that number, our NRR is this, our NPS is this. I want to get it to this and this. I need resources, right? And that will, for those who are numbers driven, they can do the math. They can run it through the model, and they're like, okay, that sounds good. The robot, it works, and the spreadsheet works. For those who are sort of maybe more driven by other things, bring a few customers in, okay? Bring a couple of, bring sort of happy customers, unhappy customers, okay customers, and let them speak for you, right? And so there's a lot of things you can do, right, to get that seat at the table. And it depends, I think, on the leadership and how they and what they look like. So it's a great question.
Is that me? Oh.
Yep.
Is this on? Is this on? Okay. I have a two-part question. Is this on?
It is
Okay.
on. Yep.
First is I noticed your support team reports into product.
Mm-hmm.
So in what cases do you think different aspects of the post-sales experience make sense to not report to one person?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually moved, and I think it like what I tell people about growth is that the problems you solve when you're 10 million, you're going to probably solve them again at 20 million, and you're going to solve them again at 40 and 50 million. And so we, like that chart that I showed you guys where it had all the kind of CS functions, that when I was CCO, they all reported to me. And then we made all these changes, and we just recently put them under the CTO function. And the reason why is we did it because I wanted the support team to be closer to the product and to be closer to engineering. And I wanted better dialogue. I didn't want them to have to go through a CS leader to get to engineering. And then also, not that our CTO and CPO are not customer focused, because they very much are, but I think it showed them some of the typical pain points that were coming in, that were repeated pain points coming in from the support desk. And then we started to build those things into the product now to make it easier. So it solves some of our user experience issues as well. It's not perfect, but it wasn't always there, and we changed it. So I think the answer is it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. And then we're a pretty nimble organization, and it's worked well.
So it's going to change again.
It won't change again. Not for now.
So I have a second question, which is, should the head of customer success report to the CEO or the CRO?
So we have a unique function that I created. Well, it's not, we have a COO, but the COO's role at our company is what I would call forward-facing ops, not back office ops, but forward-facing ops. And so under our COO, Ian Walsh, who was our head of marketing, and he's very, very, very smart, and just was a great fit for that role. He owns PS, CS. He owns partnerships, because we're going to market with a lot of partnerships, and he also owns commercialization. One of the areas I thought we were not doing well was really taking our product and ensuring that it was commercialized properly in the market. So packaging, pricing, that tie between the product, and we have great product, to how the market's actually using it, and then taking it to market that way. And so we're a little bit unique in that we have all those customer-facing functions reporting to him, and he reports to me.
Not a separate CCO.
There's not a separate CCO, no. But we are thinking about and have advertised a head of customer experience to look at the journey all the way across all functions, because we tend to be a little bit siloed. So
We'll survey that, and it's actually I think we survey that, so we'll take a look at how that's trended over the years. I think it's about half now, CRO to CEO, and it's trickling towards CEO more. So that's what we're seeing. All right, last question. Anyone has a final question for?
Hi. Sort of following up on this idea of hyper segmentation, given that FranConnect seems to have a pretty diverse landscape of markets and different businesses within those markets, how are you thinking about KPIs within those individual market sets relative to itself versus revenue size? Yeah,
we do. I mean, so we don't have, we probably track 50 to 60 KPIs, so I don't want to create another, I'm not going to multiply that times 4. That would just be crazy. But there are a few that are differentiated. Certainly, we call it our car waterfall, so our net retention numbers and how that flows through, year over year, quarter over quarter, in terms of revenue to churn to logo churn to same-store sales growth. So we look at that, and we do differentiate that kind of car waterfall in the markets. The other thing we look at is our CAC ratios. Our CAC ratios inherently are just different in the lower end of the market than they are in the upper end of the market. And we're okay with, we got to be okay with that, because if we're serving the entire market, we're naturally just going to have higher churn, and therefore lower CAC on some of the on the lower end of the market. But when those players hit, they hit big and they grow fast. Like Orange Theory is a customer of ours. They started with us when they were, nascent, and now they're 1,500 units worldwide and growing. And so, the nature of the game is high growth, and so we have to serve that entire market. But we do look at like CAC and our retention waterfall. We look at differently.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, well, let's end there. And we have a full day, and thank you, Gabby,
Yeah, thank
for
you. It was
being
awesome.
here. So we're going to say thanks to Gabby.